Hello my people, FinerBub here. Thanks for checking out the video. Today, we're talking about a sweet 7-mile day hiking loop with several epic views in Mount Beacon Park, a subsection of New York's Hudson Highlands State Park, which, as many of you know, has my vote for the best day hiking option for people living in and around New York City. Throughout the video, I'll cover the basic info that I think you need to know if you plan to hike this loop yourself, and towards the end, I'll share some of my personal thoughts, in addition to a useful bonus tip so that you can get a feel for whether or not this hike might be a good option for you. But before we get into that, just a little tidbit for those of you who don't know. On this channel, I'm all about sharing my thoughts and experience on the best spots to check out and the best gear to bring with. So if, like me, you'd like to spend more time outside appreciating the finer things in life, do yourself a favor and consider subscribing. Also, feel free to check out the description below for links to any of the gear or hiking information resources I mention. Alrighty then, without further ado, let us begin.
I want to say mountains again! Mountains!
So, a couple months ago, my buddy Travis and I made another trip up to New York's Hudson Highlands in order to squeeze in a final glimpse at last year's foliage before the end of the season. We started our day here, at the Mount Beacon Scenic Hudson parking lot at the Breakneck Ridge Trailhead in Beacon, New York. And yes, this is the same Breakneck Ridge Trail featured in my Breakneck Ridge video. However, unlike my video about hiking Breakneck Ridge, the hike featured in today's episode is located on the opposite side of Hudson Highlands State Park. Okay, so from the parking lot, the Breakneck Ridge Trail starts off on a pretty flat section before reaching this metal staircase, beginning the steep ascent towards the intersection with the Dry Brook Connector Trail and the beginning of our loop. As with all of the Hudson Highlands hikes that I've made videos about, the initial ascent up the Breakneck Ridge Trail is a steep workout that covers the majority of the elevation that you'll gain throughout the day. Since we wanted to get the majority of the elevation gain out of the way quickly, we stuck to the Breakneck Ridge Trail, opting for a counterclockwise loop. Once the trail starts to flatten out, you'll pass the ruins of the incline railway powerhouse just before you reach the Beacon Overlook. At this point, knowing that the hard part was over, we stopped for a short break while we took in the view of Beacon and the Hudson River beyond. After eating a snack and taking all of the obligatory selfies, we continued along our loop. This next section of the hike had a couple decent views, but for the most part, it was more of a nice leisurely forest walk. Once we reached the intersection with the Casino Trail, instead of continuing straight, we decided to turn right, sticking to the Breakneck Ridge Trail for a short detour to check out the Mount Beacon Fire Tower. This was by far one of the cooler sections of this hike, so I definitely recommend it for those who have a bit more uphill energy left over after the initial ascent up to the Beacon Overlook. The Fire Tower detour consists of a short walk up a rock face where the views just keep getting better and better, and after a little while, you'll start to see the fire tower poking up from behind the peak. The tower itself is a pretty cool sight in its own right, but the view from the top is the real deal. We hung out around the tower for a bit, soaking in the sights and taking tons of photos before we swung back around to the Casino Trail and continued along our loop. This section of the trail repeatedly pops in and out of the brush, hitting a handful of lookout points that provide a variety of different views of Hudson Highlands State Park and the surrounding area. Once you begin your descent back down into the woods, there are a few short up and down sections, but for the most part, the terrain is pretty mild and easygoing for the remainder of the hike. Now, there are a lot of interconnected trails in this section of Hudson Highlands State Park, so even though the actual hiking is not all that hard, the second half of this loop can be a bit of a navigational nightmare. I've linked our All Trails map in the video description, but just FYI, from the Casino Trail, we turned left on the Wilkinson Memorial Trail, then transitioned to the Dozer Junction Connector Trail, before switching to the Fishkill Ridge Trail, which then led us to the Dry Brook Connector Trail, leading us back to the Breakneck Ridge Trail in the beginning of the loop. So, what are my thoughts about this loop? Well, simply put, it was a great time. It's not all that challenging, so you won't feel like you need a recovery day afterwards. And for the effort you do have to put in, you get a ton of amazing views from different vantage points distributed throughout the hike. And even though the terrain is pretty mild, the 7 miles of trail you have to cover still makes it feel like you had a full day with a solid workout. This has definitely been a running theme that I've noticed about the Hudson Highlands. Being right next to the river really makes for beautiful views at relatively low elevations compared to most of the hikes that I've done. And despite the state park's easily accessible location, once you pass the initial ridgeline, the hills and forest really envelop you, making it feel like you're much further from civilization than you actually are. As I mentioned, despite the fact that this hike doesn't offer all that much of a physical challenge, the hardest part of this loop was definitely the navigation. And just so you know, this is not simply due to the confusing rat's nest of interconnected trails, but mainly because the cell reception becomes very spotty when you're popping in and out of these hills. On more than one occasion throughout the day, we made navigational errors that led us astray because we weren't able to pinpoint our exact location on the map. This brings us to today's bonus tip. Today's bonus tip is brought to you by the FinerBub merch shop. If you're looking to grab a gift gift for that special hiker in your life, or if you just want to treat yourself to some new athletic wear or a silly looking face mask, whilst simultaneously supporting your friendly neighborhood FinerBub, be sure to check out my latest designs at finerbub.threadless.com or by following the link in the video description. Today's bonus tip is as follows. Be sure to download the offline maps of this area before you leave home and set out for this hike. There are a number of apps on which you can do this, but the three I personally use and recommend are Google Maps, AllTrails, and Hiking Project. Downloading these maps onto your phone makes a world of a difference in terms of the amount of time you can save that would otherwise be spent staring at a loading screen as you try to determine if you've missed your turn or not. So, who is this hike best suited for? Well, to be honest, I think it's a great option for almost anyone. It might be a little long for families with small kids, but as I keep mentioning, given its location, Hudson Highlands State Park is a great destination for people living in and around New York City. It's still quite shocking to me how beautiful the area is for how little effort it takes to get there, combined with the fact that the mild terrain, epic views, and vast network of interconnected trails really make it customizable for all ages and skill levels by shortening or lengthening your hike as needed. And that's really all there is to it. All in all, with a total of 7 miles, this hike is a bit longer than the majority of hikes that I've recommended for beginners, but the terrain is really mild and you'll knock out most of the elevation in the first hour of the hike. So for most people, the distance really shouldn't be a problem. It's not quite as short or easy as Bear Mountain or Anthony's Nose, two other Hudson Highlands half-day hikes that I've made videos about. So unlike those two examples, I don't think I'd quite call this hike a walk in the park, but maybe a long walk in the park with multiple epic views. So there you have it, folks. I'd like to wish a very warm welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. If this is the first video of mine that you've seen, I just want to let you know that I also make gear review videos in addition to the location guides like this one. So if you're curious about some of the gear that I brought on this hike, or you just want to learn about some more exciting new places via yours truly, I'll leave some links down below that should suit you quite nicely. Alrighty, my people, that concludes today's episode of the FinerBub Show. If you've already hiked the Mount Beacon Loop in New York's Hudson Highlands State Park, or if you're thinking about checking it out for the first time, I'd love to have you comment below, especially if you think your insight can help me disprove something that I think I already know. But before you do, I just want to once again thank you so much for watching. If you're planning your next trip or looking for new gear, don't let the small details stress you out. Remember, life's an adventure, so relax, breathe in the outdoors, and don't forget to appreciate the finer things in life. See you out there, people. Peace.
We did it, dude.
There?
We're there.
Nice.
Look, we went up that way before. Now we're going down. We're back at the steps. Oh boy, I can see the road. I'm gonna be first. There he is. I'm gonna be first.